Hello again, everybody, and welcome to the CB&Q in Wyoming. I'm Mark Pruitt. Another month has gone by already. Today is April 3rd, 2019, and that means it's time for another layout construction update. This one is number 9. A lot was accomplished this month, so let's jump right in. Early this past month, my friend Walt came over and helped me start expanding the layout out of Casper by building some new benchwork. The part that extends along the wall will be the location of the Oren-Franny interchange yard, while the part that sticks out towards the camera is Powder River and Chopon, which will lead off in the left foreground to the Wind River Canyon and points beyond. Note the position of the peninsula relative to the marks on the floor. We'll be talking more about that in a couple of minutes. A few days after we got the L-girder base constructed, I had the grid boxes in place. The reason the box in the foreground has the big gap between cross members is that I ran out of plywood strips. I'll fill those in when I cut more. By the second half of March, I was installing new subroad bed and track. What you see here is for the first part of the Northern Pacific tracks to be laid, the hidden turnback curve for staging. A couple days later, those NP tracks were in. That's the curve on the left. The higher level plywood in the background is the sub-road bed for the Oren-Franny interchange yard and the track leading to it from Casper. This view is just to give you a reference for how it fits relative to Casper. Another few days gone by and the cork road bed is laid and ready for track. The switch block in the left center is the first switch off the main for the Oren-Franny yard. There was a brief pause during the month to install a few more of the ceiling panels and another light fixture. Now that I had the beginnings of the peninsula in place, I realized how much open floor space I had between Casper and the table across the aisle. Now, I've operated on some layouts with narrow aisles, and being a rather large person myself, it was just plain hard to move around in those spaces. So I really appreciate ample aisleways. But this was maybe too ample. The distance between the Casper table and the Chopon table is about 6.5 feet. Yeah, it tapers off to the right, but still. So I made a tweak to the layout plan. I changed the angle of the Powder River table off the right-hand wall from 75 degrees to 85 degrees, almost perpendicular. This changed the aisle width between Chopon and Casper to about 5 feet. Still ample, but it allows a bit of additional length in the Wind River Canyon and more space for the Boysen Reservoir just past Chopon. Remember the position of the peninsula against the marks on the floor? Here's what it looks like now that it's been repositioned. I caught this at just the right time. I was laying out the track to Powder River when this idea hit me. A day later would have seen me cutting out just installed sub-road bed to make this change. And while I was revising the track plan, I decided to take a stab at the Thermopolis and Worland Peninsula. Those sidings were short. Thermopolis could only hold a 14-car train plus loco and caboose, and Worland about the same. Did the two towns really have to be parallel on opposite sides of the backdrop? Was there some way I could avoid the S-curves at both ends of the turnaround blob? The answers are no and yes. Here's the new arrangement I came up with. By eliminating the S-curves, I was able to use those spaces to extend the sidings, and as a bonus, I also found more real estate for industries and scenery in both towns. The new siding length for Thermopolis allows for 21 cars, and Worland allows for 18. Much better. On the last day of March, with the peninsula now repositioned, I began installing the sub-road bed and cork leading to Powder River and Chopon. After one day's work, I was ready to place some track. Of course, that curve out of Casper had to be super elevated. Here's my approach to it. I lay 1/4 inch masking tape, layer upon layer with the ends staggered 2 inches in for each layer, under the outside rail of the track. 6 layers of tape equate to just over 2 scale inches of super elevation. And then came track. Here you see the track extending from the first Casper switch. I don't fasten my turnouts down tightly. Sometimes I'll use a few spikes, and other times I'll leave it floating freely, as in this case. Since this point will be a transition from one power district to another, I installed insulated rail joiners here. As those provide very little rail end alignment strength, I pin the end of the switch in place, as well as the end of the track which attaches, since that track is on a curve. Once the caulk dries, the curve will be solidly affixed and the pins can be removed. Here's the curve laid out of Casper, with soda cans in place to hold the track for the caulk to dry. You may have noticed that I've switched from foam to plywood. While the foam didn't give me any problems and I can see several advantages to using it, even after building most of Casper on foam, my comfort zone is much better in plywood, so I've gone back to that. This shows the interface between the two. The joint is made with plain old hot glue. While it's not real strong, it does provide a base to ensure the top surface of the foam and the plywood are even, assuming I cut the foam to the right depth. This shot shows, rather poorly I'm afraid, the joint between plywood and foam on the Powder River connection to Casper. Once the caulk on the Powder River extension was dry, I removed the cans, wired up power feeders, and cleaned the track for testing. Here we see a Mikado running slowly back and forth on the track with a couple of cars to test the alignment. While it's running, I watch the loco wheels very closely for any irregularities in motion that might signal a kink or a bump or dip in the rails. I especially watch the lead and trailing trucks for any indication that they may climb the rail. Looked pretty solid to me. Did you see anything amiss? And what about that super elevation? Here's a shot of another Mikado pulling a train around the curve. Doesn't that look sweet? To borrow a line from the late Walter Cronkite, and that's the way it is. This video is a bit longer than usual this month. I hope you don't mind. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next month.